Okay, today we're going to go over this chapter 5, which is the job order costing. Before we do that, let's think about something what we covered so far. So far we covered that, and we already know that we have three type of companies, three type of businesses. Three type of businesses. One is the service, the other one is merchandising, and the third one is the manufacturing business. If you're in the service business, you're going to have a very little inventory, pretty much nothing on the inventory. If you're merchandising company, mostly you're going to have inventory. And if you're manufacturing company, you're going to have inventory, but that inventory is going to be part of, or inventory will be in three accounts. One will be the raw material that you're purchasing. The other one will be work in process. And the third one will be the finished goods. Now, because of that, in the manufacturing company, we have to produce that product. And to produce the product, we need that product cost, which product cost will become a part of the inventory for the time being until the inventory is sold. The whole idea is you to generate profit. And the only way to generate profit is to have sales. There's no other way you to generate profit. You have to have sales. But you won't have sales until you have cost first. So you have to buy the inventory, then you sell the inventory, then you can generate a profit. So the sales comes after you purchase something, then you have something to sell, unless you're selling services. So for that reason, we have this product cost, which the product cost is direct material, direct labor, manufacturing overhead. Once we have all those three things together, we can say, okay, I have a product. Then you can sell it and become a cost of goods sold. Why? Because cost, you already sold it. And that whatever you're selling comes with a cost. And you always want to see how much is the sales minus cost of goods sold. How much costs me for this to sell it and how much sales I'm generating. So you can see how much you're making for every single product. Now we have, for that reason, we have this product cost, direct material, direct labor, manufacturing overhead. And we have the period cost, which period cost is directly expense, which is the cost for the operating the business, which supports the main production, which is either merchandising company selling the inventory that you're doing, or for the manufacturing company is to producing the product and then sell the product. That was one cost classification based on is it the product cost or see the period cost. The other cost classification was based on how the cost behave. Now forget about the product and period cost. Now the same cost we're getting together and we're chasing how the cost behave. And they have only two options to behave. Either they're going to behave as a variable cost, either they behave as a fixed cost. Just to make it simple for us. So one thing you always have to remember, and you know it from your personal life. Variable cost per unit stays the same. So the cost per unit that when you go to buy the groceries, cost per tomato, cost per pound of potato, pound of broccoli, pound of strawberry, pound of cherries, they stay the same. The only thing that drives the cost is how much you're buying. If you decide that, okay, strawberry is too expensive, I'm not buying, cost for you is zero. But if you see that, okay, they're selling this at that pound, that many pounds, that many dollars per pound, then I need 3 pounds. Whatever you want, that's the number of the pounds drive the cost. Where the fixed cost in total always stays the same. So your rent or your Compass card, monthly Compass pass stays the same. You're paying the same amount. Now the question is, do you use it or not? If you use it, that means you make the cost to work for you. If you don't use it, the cost doesn't work. You're wasting your money on something that you don't need, but you're paying it anyway. This is and that's how the cost behave. Again, remember, cost behave two ways. Variable as a variable cost, it's a fixed cost. Variable cost per unit stays the same. Variable cost in total always goes up. based on the consumption or based on the purchase, based on the driven miles, anything like that, where the fixed cost in total stays the same, but per unit you try to reduce it by using it more, producing more, or going on the SkyTrain more times, or putting more people in that one bedroom apartment. So once we know this, the other thing that we learn is we have two type of income statement. One is the traditional, which you have sales, cost of goods sold, gross margin, operating expenses, operating income, and the contribution margin income statement when we're doing the cost, but by the way they behave. We have cost sales, uh, variable cost, then we have contribution margin, fixed cost, and operating expenses. So last week we learned how to do the break-even point. And the break-even point is at the point when the sales are equal to the total expenses. So basically, we covering the expenses. Or the money that you earn at work, you're earning enough to cover all your expenses. There's zero savings. Is that good for you? Obviously, it's good because you're covering the expenses. It's not perfectly good because there's no savings left, but at least you're covering the expenses. So that's the first crucial point. And the first crucial point we're measuring as a total amount of the sales that you have to get, or the number of units that you need to sell in order to generate that sales, which is going to give you the amount equal to the whole expenses. And after that, we start making money and everything like that. Now, today, what we're going to look, we're going to go to the traditional income statement, and we're going to see, we're going to chase the cost of our product. So the important thing in business is you to understand the cost, to understand how the costs behave, and to think about, is there anything I can do about the cost? Because again, sales comes after. Yes, everybody opened the business because he wants profit. There's no person in the world that opened business because he doesn't want profit. Everybody wants profit. Humans are rational. You can predict the humans. So based on that, everybody wants profit. How are you going to generate the profit? Well, the simple thing is make sure the sales are more than the cost. That's how simple it is. So since the cost comes first, you always need to know how much is the cost in order to set up the sales price. So today we're going to work on this, how we're going to get the cost of our product to make sure that we're selling it at above the cost, or at least to cover our cost. So let's start with today's chapter. First thing is how we're going to get the cost of our products. Again, we're a manufacturing company with manufacturing products. How are we going to get the cost? There are two common ways to get the cost. Now, based on the process that we're running in our company, we have two options here. First option is we're producing one product and one product only. Which product repeat itself, and we're producing the many units of that single product. So that means one unit cannot be distinguished from the other unit. Imagine you producing only yogurt, plain yogurt, and that's all we produce. So we cannot distinguish one from the other. When you go to the store, you're just grabbing one and just go. You're not choosing that one because that one has more or it tastes different or anything like that. They're all the same. And the identical nature of each product gives us opportunity to get easy the cost of all the products. How are we going to do that? We're going to, for the period of time, let's say 1 month, we're going to see how many products we produce. We're going to see how much is the total cost for that period of time. Cost divided by the number of products is going to give us the average cost per unit. And we get our cost. Which company is going to use this one? Company that producing the same product over and over. That will be the cement mix or refining oil or Coca-Cola beverage. So what the Coca-Cola is doing is just this line that producing Coca-Cola, one line that producing Sprite, the other line that producing Fanta, and what they're doing is just combining the total cost divided by the number of units, cost per unit, done. Now I know how much will need to be my selling price. Why? Because I know my cost per unit. That seems easy. Now the other thing is the other option that we have in the company is not to produce the same single identical product, but to produce different products. Simple thing will be to show you this example will be this. Imagine you are a bakery. You're a bakery. One option is you to produce cheesecakes, which cheesecakes is exactly the same, and you sell it. You're selling your cheesecakes in Safe Home Foods and Whole Foods. Those are your uh, customers. So what you're doing, you just producing cheesecakes. Every morning you're producing 1,200 cheesecakes, which are distributed to those stores. They're exactly the identical. There's no difference. The same weight, the same ingredients, the same mixtures. Everything is the same. You're producing it and then you're selling it. The second option is you to make birthday cakes. Now, the birthday cake is a different story because every customer needs different needs. So you're not producing the cake before the customer order it. So for that reason, you're waiting for the customer. You have the pictures of different cakes sitting, and you have some basic cakes which is sitting um, on your store, the customer to see them. But you're doing also custom cakes. So when the customer comes and say, I want 3 layers cakes with this, with this, with this, with this, one with the strawberry, the other one with the flavor to be roseberry, and the third one to be banana. In the middle to have this cream, one to be white, the other one to be blue, the other one to be red, and all the other different things. So now, in that case, you have to produce that cake. Now, as you can see now, you can produce different type of products. So for the job costing, when the company using the job costing system, they're producing a different type of products. And the product is produced, or the cake is produced only and only when the customer comes and order it. You're not just producing it, because that's a specific customized for that person only. Now, the unique nature of each product, or each cake in this case, requires us to find the cost for that particular cake in order to come up with the selling price. And we have to be very, very, very explicit in the cost. Otherwise, we're going to lose money. So which example for this company that might use the job costing? One will be the Bombardier. That's producing the airplanes. I don't know if they're still producing. Used to be Canadian. I believe they already sold it. But they're also producing the Skytrains. So everything that they're producing, it's unique, and it comes after the order from the government or from the TransLink, wherever they comes, and then they're producing it. The next thing is the Becher International, which it's a large construction company, which again doing the projects, but only when the customer want it. So every project is different. And the last thing that we can say is the Hallmark. Hallmark, why is that different? Because Hallmark in this case, every single card in Hallmark is different. So once we know those things, let's see what's the next one for us. Next one is to compare those two. So what we have here, first thing we have is We have the job order. So on the job order, number of the jobs that we can produce are many. Again, we're doing only the single product. In the process costing, we're doing only single product. How we accumulating the costs on the job order? We accumulating the cost per job or per purchase order. Where in the process, we accumulating the cost per department. What will be the average cost? Average cost will be by department. So we're going to take the total cost divided by the number of units, and we're going to come up with the cost per unit. Where in the job order costing, we're going to find the job, the cost for every single order that we can have from our customers. So let's do this quick check very quickly. Which of the following company most likely will use the job order costing compared to the process costing? Let's see first one. First one is the Scott's Paper, a Scott Paper company which producing the Kleenex. Which costing they're gonna use? Job costing or the process costing?
Job costing?
Let's think about it. Kleenex, what they producing?
Tissue paper.
Tissue.
Tissue. Did they changing the tissues or the same tissue?
The same tissue.
The same.
The same tissue. So which system, which costing they're gonna use?
Process
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 costing,
costing.
right? Because there's the same tissue, the same tissue, the same tissue. The only thing that what we're gonna do, if you want to change the color of the box, but the inside is the same tissue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Make sense? How about the architect company?
job order.
Job order, right? Because there are not two customers that are gonna come and say, I want the same house, right? Everybody wants different things. How about hands where they're producing ketchup? Process, right? Because they're just producing ketchup, that's all. How about the caterer for the wedding reception?
Process?
Job order.
Job order.
Job order, right? Because one customer comes, I want wedding for 20 people. The other ones, I want wedding for 500 people. The third one's gonna come and I want wedding only for 2 people. Different thing. How about the commercial fishing vessel company that producing those vessels? Are they going to be conveyed at producing vessels like a crazy?
Commercial fishing vessels. Right?
Job order?
Job order, yes, job order, right? They're not, you're not, there's no fishing company that or builder that's gonna start producing. Okay, let's start producing the commercial fishing vessels, which are like a ginormous kind of ships. I'm gonna start producing, like, gonna produce this month 1,000 of them. That's not gonna happen, right? So when they're producing those one, only when the customer comes and say, okay, I want this and this and this and this and this. Okay, I can do it for you. Make sense? So the companies that are going to use the job order is the architects, caterer, and the commercial. So let's see now. Again, let's go with our cakes, bakery cake stuff, and let's start making cake. So again, in order to make a cake, what do we need? We need 3 things. We need, yes, which will be our direct material. Then what we need? Somebody to start working on it. Those ingredients, they're not going to mix each other by himself, right? If you let's do this. Are you baking cakes at home or not?
Yes.
Okay, so what you do? You get the eggs, you get the sugar, you get the vanilla, a little bit pinch of vanilla. You get the flour. If you want to put some other mixed ingredients, okay, fine. So you put it in the bowl and you leave it, right?
No, we have to mix it.
No, because if you don't use the labor, then you can leave it in the bowl.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right? So now you can see you have the direct material. You're putting all the ingredients in the bowl, and then you leave. And you're coming 1 hour later. What's happened with the ingredients?
They're going to be wasted?
right? Nothing's going to happen, right? They're not going to mix each other by himself.
No.
Right? So what they need somebody to work on it. They need the direct labor. Make sense? That's why we need the direct material. Now, which will be the direct material? X will be direct material. Sugar will be direct material. Flour will be direct material. Then we need somebody to start working. That will be the labor, direct labor. What will be the indirect material? Indirect material will be a little bit vanilla, a little bit color for the coloring. That will be the indirect material, which will be the very small amount, and it will be very hard to come up right away with the cost of those ones. What else we need? We need some, after we do everything, we need somebody to clean this, the bowl that we're using, or all the mixer and everything that we're using. Somebody has to clean it. That will be our indirect labor. Make sense? So once we get, also we need the electricity, right? We need the space that we're gonna make it. We have to bake it. We need electricity to first for the mixer to mix all the ingredients. Second, to bake the cake. And we need the oven as well. All those will be manufacturing overhead cost. So let's see how we're gonna do this. I'm gonna drop this, whatever we have here, and I'm gonna move to Excel spreadsheet. And we're gonna start building on the Excel spreadsheet the way we did last time. The only difference is this time I'm gonna need accounts. Which accounts I'm gonna show you in the second. Let me find something that we did for the, if you remember, we had some accounts on the, when we calculating the manufacturing overhead and the cost of goods sold. No, we haven't calculated manufacturing overhead yet. Today we're gonna calculate that, but when we're doing the cost of goods sold, we had those accounts. So I'm gonna copy those accounts and I'm gonna put it in one Excel spreadsheet, new Excel spreadsheet, and we're gonna start working on those ones.
And we are doing an example of job ordering costing because each cake that I'm gonna produce is different, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Right? If they were the same, we're not gonna do that. Right? That's the tricky part. If it's the same, there's no reason for doing that. So how are we gonna get cost per cake? Well, the cost per cake will be just whatever cost we have for the month divided by the number of the cakes that we produced at that month. That's my cost. Right? But imagine this: you open your cake factory or cake store. The customer coming and say, "Hi, can I buy a birthday cake?" And you say, "What you gonna say? Yes or no?"
Where? In a grocery store?
No. You have your own cake bakery store. Customer comes and say, "Can I purchase a birthday cake?" What you gonna say? Yes or no?
Yes.
Of course, yes, right? That's why you open your store, to produce the cake, right? And the next question is, what kind of cake you want? And the customer says, okay, I want a 3 layers cake with the Lionel Messi on the top. It has to be with white, blue, white, right? Just to Argentina flag, or blue, white, blue with Argentina flag. The top and the bottom to be vanilla flavor, in the middle to be the blueberry flavor, with inside the cream to be, the top cream to be with butter, the bottom cream to be with whipped cream. And what else? I think that's about it. And also the layers to be in different colors inside. And the next thing, okay, what you're gonna say? Yeah, no problem, I'm gonna do it. And the next thing customer's gonna ask you, how much gonna cost me? So once the customer says how much you're gonna cost me, you have to tell him the price right away. Correct? But that price have to cover all the cost. cost for material, cost for the labor, cost for the manufacturing overhead. Because if you miss any of those costs, you're not going to make money. And if you don't make money, if you keep selling your cakes without knowing the actual cost, you just look at the customer and say, okay, give me $50, fine. And the customer is going to pay you $50. The question is those $50 that the customer pays enough to cover your cost? Because if you work in 1 month and you don't know your actual cost of the product that you're selling, but you're just selling it, and at the end of the month you might find, or maybe if you're doing your financial statements once a month, you can catch it at the end of the month. But if you don't doing it, by the time you're catching that you're not selling, you're not covering your costs with your sales, it will be too late. You're going to start wondering why I'm not making money, how much I'm losing. But since you're not doing your accounting, it's going to be too late for you, and you just have to close. And you don't know why you're losing money.
Oh, okay, got it.
Right? So for that reason, what you need to do is you need to know the actual cost before you even open your mouth to tell the customer how much to pay you. Because if you don't cover your cost, gone. Customer is gone. Have you ever buy cakes here from anywhere in Canada?
No, not the personalized ones, like where you go and order one, like mostly from Whole Foods or
Okay. So when you go to the
groceries.
Whole Foods, you see the price, right?
Yes.
And you say you're
Yes.
paying the
Yes,
price,
Prof.
right? And you're paying the
Mhm.
price.
Yeah.
Did you ever have experience? You're paying what they ask you to pay. You're walking away from the store, and did you ever have experience somebody running after you and telling you, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry, we forgot to include the cost of vanilla that we use in the cake, and our calculation for the cost is wrong for this cake. Can you please pay us $2 extra because otherwise we're gonna lose money?"
No.
No. So what that means? That means that once you pay, customer pays. Customer pays. He's working with the cake. If you haven't included any of the cost that you have for the cake, now it's your problem. Because the customer is already gone. You're not going to keep track of the name of the customers with the phone numbers. And if you see that you forgot to include something in the cost, then you start calling them and say, "I'm so sorry, but you have to pay me $5 more because of I missed this cost or I missed that cost." Correct? So that's how important is this. So let's start working on the process, and let's see how we're going to get this cost. Gonna stop sharing this screen, and I'm gonna move to the screen that I want to share with the Excel spreadsheet. And let's start digging with this. So you can see my screen, right? Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, bro.
Okay.
Yes.
So what we're gonna have? We're gonna have the raw materials. We're gonna have our 3 accounts: raw materials, work in process, and finished goods. So again, we're producing our cake. In order to get the cake has to come here as a finished goods, right? To be ready for the customers, because customer at that point can actually take it and walk away and pay the money. But in order to produce it, it has to come up with we have to have this cost of goods manufactured, which will be the cost of our cake. That's what we're chasing. This is the important part for us. How are we going to get it? Since we're doing the product, we're going to have, how many costs we're going to have here? 3 costs, right? One will be direct material. Next one will be direct labor. And the third one will be manufacturing overhead. Now the question is, how are we going to get direct material? How are we going to get direct labor? And how are we going to get manufacturing overhead? Because once I have those 3, I have cost of goods manufactured. Once I have my cost of goods manufactured, I can sell it. That will be the cost of the finished good. I can sell it to the customer and see how much I make. Let's start with direct material. From where the direct material is going to come? Most likely from raw material.
Ingredients? Oh, the raw
The raw
materials.
material, right? Direct material is going to come from the raw materials. Once we have our raw materials, then they're going to have direct material. If I don't have the raw materials, I'm not going to have direct material. From where I'm going to get the raw material? I have to purchase it, right? Once I purchase my raw material, I can see how much it costs me. Then the cost of the direct material that I'm using is going to be directly in my process. So here, what I'm going to have here, I'm going to have, let's say, in our bakery store, we're going to have the eggs, we're going to have the sugar, we're going to have the flour. Very basic cake. Okay. Are we going to have some indirect material? Are we going to use a little bit oil? Are we going to use a little bit vanilla? What do you think? Yes or no?
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
We have to use those ones. Why? Because otherwise, the cake's going to be not good. So that will be our indirect material. What should I do with the indirect material? In that case, so now in order for me to track all the costs, I'm going to go open a new account here. And that new account is going to be called manufacturing overhead account. I'm going to keep the cost of the manufacturing overhead separately. And that will be my manufacturing overhead account. So what will be interesting with this account? This account is going to be cumulative account. What that means? Cumulative account means at the end of the period, there will be no balance in this account. There's no beginning balance, no ending balance. So at the end of the period, when the period is over, my balance here has to be 0. Nothing more, nothing less. Balance has to be 0. So I cannot have balance in this account. But during the period, I'm going to start accumulating the cost. And since I'm using some indirect material, I'm going to start keep tracking of that cost. For the vanilla, for the oil, for some coloring and anything like that. So that will be my indirect material. So let's put some indirect material here. Let's get one of those shapes, fancy shapes. And let's grab it here and put first one indirect material. That's going to come right here. Let me see how I can grab it, this one. And stretch it. I don't want to do it this way. That's changed my picture. I wanted to do it this way. So let's see if I can stretch it. To fit my purposes. No, it doesn't work that way. So this will be my indirect material. I'm going to put it like that. That will be my indirect material. So from the raw material, once I start using them, I'm going to have two things. Let's make it this one the same equal size like the other one to be direct indirect material. So I'm going to have my direct material first. Let's put it in blue. And I'm going to have my indirect material, which all coming from the purchase and the raw material account. Make sense?
Yes.
So the next thing that we have to do is to get the direct labor. Now, from where I'm going to get the direct labor, I can get it from some payroll account. And that will be, let's make here one small payroll account. Very, very small, because we're not going to worry about this payroll account. and but we want to have it just for the purpose of our visualization. That will be the payroll payable account. From the payroll payable account, what we're going to get? We're going to get our direct labor. Once the people start working on our cake, we're going to get our direct labor. And also we're going to get our indirect labor. So direct labor is going to put, let's put a different color here. Let's put it in the red color. And we're going to have from here, we're going to get our indirect labor, which will be directly coming from here. What will be the indirect labor? In the indirect labor, we're going to keep track of security, of the cleaning, and all the other things. So that will be indirect labor. So now we have direct material, direct labor, indirect material, indirect labor. The question is, how are we going to get this manufacturing overhead cost? This is our question now. Well, the manufacturing overhead cost, we're going to get it from the manufacturing overhead account. That's why we opened this account. And again, on this account, on this side will be debit, the other side will be credit. That's no questions about it. But the tricky part here is what we're going to do on the debit side and what we're going to do on the credit side. So on the debit side, we're going to keep the actual cost, and we're going to start accumulating the actual cost that we have during the period. Now the question is, what other manufacturing overhead costs we're going to have? Well, let's think about it. We're going to have electricity, right? We have for rent. We have security. We have to pay the property taxes. What else? We may have to pay, we have to put the depreciation of our oven and our equipment, right? So you can see how many different costs we may have here. And let's put some utilities. So we have so many different costs which are part of manufacturing overhead. So what's interesting with these costs? The interesting with these costs is I forgot the insurance. Sorry, I have to put here insurance as well. We need insurance in our company. So all those costs come at different point. Electricity usually comes 2 months after we use the electricity. Rent, we usually pay it every month before the start of the month. Security, we may pay it once every 3 months. Depreciation, usually we're going to do depreciation once a year. Insurance, you're paying once a year. Utilities, now for the utilities with different utilities, different time. Property taxes, again, we pay it once a year. So as you can see, different manufacturing costs, different timing, at different points they're gonna come. So we want to know the actual manufacturing overhead cost until the end of the period. So what shall we do? Imagine this. Imagine, let's keep aside the cake store for a second. Let's make it a little bit more simple. Imagine this. We're running our coffee shop. We have coffee shop. On January 1st, 6 o'clock, the first customer comes. It's the start of the year. And he says, can I have a coffee? Yes, you're going to say, that's why I'm open my store. I'm coffee shop. Yes, you can have a coffee. How much? That's the logical way. How much? So what you start calculating? You start calculating this. Okay, I can easily get the direct material. That many beans of coffee, from the total of the coffee, I can come up with the cost of direct material. Direct labor, I can easily come up with that cost. I'm going to take how many minutes take me to prepare the coffee, divide the rate that I'm paying per hour. I can get the cost for the labor. That's not a problem. How about the manufacturing overhead cost? Well, there's so much cost here. Now, cost for the cup, cost for the napkins, cost for the cleaning the dishes that they have to do that, cost for the coffee machine, cost for the rent, cost for the insurance, cost for the property taxes, cost for the electricity, cost for the lights, cost for what else will be that? Any cost that you can imagine. But you're thinking, okay, all these costs come on different point of time. So the only way to get the total actual manufacturing overhead cost, which I can charge properly to my client, I have to wait until the end of the year to see how much my total cost and then can charge. So, but the client still is sitting in front of you and us waiting for the answer, how much you're gonna have to pay. So what you're gonna tell him, you know what? I can easily come up with direct material, direct labor. For the manufacturing overhead, I have to wait till the end of the year to get my actual cost. So why don't you get the coffee now and come on December 31st when I have the actual cost, then I can charge you for the manufacturing overhead and then you can pay me. What the customer is going to say?
No.
Never mind.
No, if I'm the customer, I'm going to say, okay, thank you for the coffee. I'm going to come December 31st. Right? And then never going to go on December 31st. So what that means? That means we have to have the manufacturing overhead right on the very first day of the year for the first customer. But again, there's a problem. We don't know the cost. Why? Because this cost is going to come through the entire year. What shall we do? Give me suggestions. How can I get the manufacturing overhead when I don't know the actual cost until the end of the year?
Estimating or
Estimating. Estimating. Thank you. That's what the word that I was looking for. Estimation. So what we're going to do, we're going to estimate it. How are we going to estimate it? Well, there are two options here. First option is, this is not your first year of business. So basically, you already have some experience from the last year. So you know how much is the cost is. What you have to do is you have to update for the inflation. You have to adjust a little bit for the price changes, and you can estimate it. If this is your first year of business, then become a little bit more tricky. But you can, from Statistic Canada, you can get the similar business. How much is the total cost to run the business? You can make some tweaks for your business, and you can still get the cost, some approximate cost. Anyway, for the rent, you already, if you start running your business, you already sign a contract for lease for this for a period of time. So you can get the rent. Security and insurance, you can easily get those one. The utilities and the electricities and depreciation, that will be a little bit more tricky, but if you put some effort, you can get those costs as well. So we're going to estimate. What we're going to estimate? We're going to estimate the total cost for the entire year. Okay, I have the cost for the year. What else I have to estimate? Well, I have to estimate, and I have to think of something that I'm going to use to apply the manufacturing overhead. Because having the cost, it doesn't solve my problem. I need something, some driver for which driver I'm going to use to apply that manufacturing overhead cost. So I'm going to start thinking which in my process, in my product, in my company, which is the thing that I'm using for all my products, not only for some of them, but for all of them. Most likely that will be the direct labor. So if I use direct labor, I can put some of the manufacturing overhead cost related to the direct labor. Because for every product that I need to produce, I have somebody to work on it. So based on the time that the person work, I can start applying some additional cost, which will be the cost for the manufacturing overhead. So what we have to do now, if we decide the direct labor to be, what I have to do, I have to get the total usage of my allocation base for the entire year. So now I have the total cost for the year as my nominator, and I might have my allocation base, which I decide to be direct labor here, for the same period of time. Now, once I have those two, I can come up.
Professor, so the usage of allocation base is direct labor.
In our case here, we're choosing the allocation base to be equal to direct labor.
Oh, okay. And for
Right?
example, in other examples, what can be direct material?
No, it's not going to be direct material, but can be kilometer driven.
Okay.
Or can be cost of direct material.
Okay.
That will be another example for this. In our case here, we're going to stick with the direct labor. We're going to choose the allocation base to be direct labor. Right? So once we get the total cost for the year, and we get the total usage of the allocation base, which we choose direct labor for the same period of time directly here, then when we divided one divided the other, we're going to get a calculation of something very interesting, which interesting is called, that interesting thing is called predetermined manufacturing overhead rate. Why predetermined? Because we're determining this before the year starts. So we determine it ahead. And that will be a number, usually dollar amount, because we have cost on this nominator and number as a denominator. So we come up with the dollar amount for the predetermined manufacturing overhead. Now I can start applying the manufacturing overhead. How I'm going to do? For every time when I use direct labor, I'm going to apply direct labor time the predetermined manufacturing overhead. So every time when the actual direct labor is used, time predetermined manufacturing overhead rate, it's going to give me the manufacturing overhead that I'm applying. Make sense? Now, when I get my total cost for the year in my coffee shop, and let's say, and I predetermine and I calculated my predetermined manufacturing cost, let's say is $4. So for every hours that I'm working, I have to charge the customer $4. Now I can get the cost of the coffee. Once I can get the cost of the coffee, I can tell the person how much to pay me. Now my problem is solved. Make sense? So that's how I'm applying the manufacturing overhead based on the application, based on the predetermined manufacturing overhead. So again, in here, the manufacturing overhead, on one side, we're going to have actual. On the other side, we're going to have applied. And once we have those two, I can, once I have the applied, I can apply the manufacturing overhead, and I can use for my calculation to come up with the cost of my product. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna flip this one, manufacturing overhead, to go right here, and that's how I'm gonna get my manufacturing overhead. Overhead applied. Now my problem is solved. Now I can get my cost of the product. Since I have direct material, direct labor, manufacturing overhead, I can calculate my cost of goods sold, and I can come up with the sales price for my product. Now, as you can see here, since I can easily come up with direct material, direct labor, manufacturing overhead is the one that doing the things very complicated. The one thing that I want you to remember here is before the start of the year, you have to come up with the total cost for the entire year. The other thing that you have to understand is if you miss any of those costs which are part of the manufacturing overhead, if you miss it, then you're not going to make the customer to pay for it. And if the customer doesn't pay for it, you have to pay for it. From where you're going to pay? Well, obviously, once we come here on the sales price, so what we're going to have here, we're going to have sales. Let's flip this one to 16. So we're going to have our sales from the income statement. We're going to have our cost of goods sold. And we're going to have our gross margin. Once we have the gross margin, then we're going to have operating expenses. And once we have the operating expenses, then we're going to have operating income. So, cost of goods sold, they're going to come from the finished goods. But before to come from the finished goods, we have to produce our product. So that cost of goods sold, first we're going to be cost of goods manufactured, then it's going to be cost of goods sold. Let's say my sales price is 100. My cost of goods sold, let's say, is 50. My gross margin in this case is 100 minus 50, that will be 50. Now the question is, how much is my operating expense? Let's say my operating expense is 30. Then my operating income is positive 20. Make sense?
Yes.
That's simple. Now, imagine this is my calculation. Now, imagine this. There was a security cost, which you forgot to include in the calculation. That means now the cost of goods sold is not going to be 50. The cost of goods sold is going to be, let's say, 45. Make sense?
Yes.
So you're thinking that you're generating more gross margin, right? Looks like you're generating more gross margin. But in reality, are you making more money? The fact that you forgot about the security, do you making more money? It looks like you're making more money, but somebody has to pay for the security. Make sense? So if you forgot to put the security at the cost of goods sold, then you have to pay from your pocket. What will be your pocket? That will be your gross margin. And now you have to pay for the security. So instead of operating expenses to be 30, you have to cover the plus the security that you have from before. So what that means? That means that you have to be very, very, very precise of the estimation of the total cost for the year. So everything that you think is part of the cost of the product, you have to put it in the cost of the product. Because if you don't put it in the cost of the product, once the customer is gone, you don't have other opportunity you to chase that customer and he to pay for it. So who has to pay for it? You have to pay for it. From where? From your gross margin. And if you don't generating enough gross margin, and let's say my gross margin here, because I forgot about the security, I forgot about the insurance, I forgot about the property taxes, I'm looking at the end of the period, I'm looking, my gross margin is 55. But my operating expenses, since I forgot about security, property taxes, and insurance, my operating expenses now are 70. Oops, I'm losing money. Now, can I go back to my customers and charge my customers to cover that extra cost? No. So what do I have to do? I have to close my business. Why? Because I didn't get my manufacturing overhead correctly. That's where we are, people. That's why the business is closing, because they cannot get their manufacturing overhead correctly. They cannot estimate their total cost for the year. So they don't know how much to apply, how much to charge the customers. And if the customer, again, don't forget, if the customers don't pay from the sales, if you're not generating that enough sales to cover all your expenses, you don't have any other options for that. Sales is the only thing that you have to cover your cost. Nothing else. Everything else, as you can see, this is a cost, this is a cost, this is calculation, this is calculation. Only one source of sales, top, bottom, top part. Everything after that is cost, the reduction, reduction, reduction. At the end is there anything left for you or nothing? So, for example, if you want to give the customer once in a while free coffee in your coffee shop, what do you have to do? Make the customer pay for it. How? Put it in the manufacturing overhead calculation. If you want to give a free pizza with president, put it in the manufacturing overhead for the company. Make the customer pay for it with the tuition fee that they're paying. It's part of the tuition fee. You're not going to tell them that. But twice a year, you can throw the free pizza with the president, which you think it's a free, but it's not, because you already pay for it. I can include other events which are free for you. But where they're going to include it? I'm going to include it in my manufacturing overhead. And I'm going to charge you for that. And you're going to pay me for it. And I'm going to generate my gross margin. And then I can give you a free event. Or I can give you something for free. And you're thinking it's free, but you already pay for it. Make sense? So what you have to do? Again, don't forget, if you don't make the customer to pay for your cost, you have to pay it from your pocket, which pocket is after the gross margin. So you better make the customer pay for it, because once the customer leaves the door, you cannot go after the customer and ask him to pay you extra. That's with the cost, and that's how they're calculating the manufacturing overhead. So now let's see at the end of the period what we say. Manufacturing overhead account cannot have a balance. The balance has to be zero. So what we're going to do? We're going to start calculating how much is the actual, how much we applied. technically we have two scenarios here. Let's say the actual, we're calculating the actual cost, and actual cost is $100,000. Option one, let's go with the option one. Option one will be the applied is exactly the same, which usually never happen. But let's say if the actual is exactly the same, then what's happened? The balance naturally is zero. That means we applied the exact amount of the actual, we applied to our costs. That cost went to the cost of goods sold, and our operating income in this case is perfect. Let's delete those one. So our operating income is correct. That's first scenario, which again usually never happen. Let's label it number one. So second scenario. Let's see what will be the second scenario. Second scenario will be we apply less. How much less? In fact, $20,000 less. Make sense? So let's think about it. Now I'm applying less manufacturing overhead. So manufacturing overhead is understated. My cost of goods manufactured are understated. My product is undercosted. If my product is undercosted, that means my cost of goods sold are undercosted. Where is my operating income now? Overcosted or undercosted? What do you think? Do you follow the logic?
Yes, so it should be like it is gonna be undercosted, the operating income.
Think about it. So how are we gonna get the operating income? Sales minus the cost. If this cost is less, what will be this number? Higher or lower?
Oh, higher.
Higher. So my operating income will be overstated.
Over.
Make sense? So if we forgot here 20,000, let's say 20,000, we forgot to include we included $20,000 less. Let's say this is our scenario. What do I have to do? I have to add 20,000 here. So if I add 20,000 here, what's going to happen now? My operating income is going to go. My operating is going to be 100. My cost of goods sold now is going to become 70. Where's my gross margin now?
30.
30. Where's operating expenses? Let's keep it the same. Where's the operating income now?
0.
It's gone. I'm lucky here. I'm not losing money, right? In this scenario, I'm not losing money. But let's say if my sales was, let's say 90, oops, I'm in trouble now. Why? Because I forgot. I didn't apply enough manufacturing overhead. Is that good for me?
No.
No. Now let's see the next scenario. That will be scenario number 3. Next scenario will be the opposite of this. Now in this case, I'm applying more. Let's say I'm applying 120. So where am I? I'm 20,000 more than I should be, correct? So what's going to happen in that scenario? If this is my actual, I'm actually adding those 20,000 more. So currently, I'm on this situation. Let's move it back to 100. Currently, I'm on this situation. But again, I'm applying 20,000 more. Let's flip it this one here. Make sense? This is my current situation. Let's see what I'm doing. I'm over applying manufacturing overhead. So if I'm over applying manufacturing overhead, my product is over costed. If my product is over costed, my cost of good manufacturing is overstated. That means my cost of goods sold are overstated as well. Where is my operating income? Overstated or understated in this case? Understated. Where it should be? I should deduct those 20. If I deduct those 20, in reality, I should be making money, right? That should be 50. And this one will be the same. So in this case, I'll be making $20,000. But because I'm overcosting my product, currently it's showing that I'm not making money. So those are the three scenarios that you have. So out of this second and third scenario, which one you prefer, to apply more overhead or to apply less overhead?
More.
More. Okay, so let's think about it. If you apply more overhead, what's going to happen? Your product have more cost, correct? Your product costs more. But if you're on competitive business, if you see the cost going up, you naturally you're going to increase the sales price because you want to make more money. If you increase the sales price, you'll start selling the most expensive product. What's going to happen with the customers?
They're not gonna buy for you because it's too expensive?
Exactly. So is it good for you to over apply manufacturing overhead?
No.
No. So that means if you under apply, it will be better, right? So let's think about if you under apply. So if you under apply manufacturing overhead in the second scenario, when you under apply manufacturing overhead, what happened in this case? Your product is cheaper, looks cheaper. So if the product looks cheaper, then what you're gonna do naturally? You're gonna start reducing the sales price. If you reduce the sales price, yes, you're gonna get more customers, but you're losing the profit. And by the time you realize that, it might be too late. You have to close your business. So which scenario will be better? Over apply or under apply? Neither, right? The best will be you to get it exactly correct. But again, that's never going to happen. In reality, that's never going to happen. They're always going to be under apply or over apply. The question is, how much is the difference? That will be the question. Obviously, you have to consider so many factors here in order to get it right. Again, you want to get it right. Why? Because you don't want to overprice your product. You don't want to undercost your product. You want to get the actual price, and so you can apply the sales price that you're applying to your products to be enough to cover your operating expenses, plus to give you the profit that you want to have. For that reason, you have to be very, very, very accurate on the cost of the product. But you're trying to, in the cost of the product, to include all the costs which you want to transfer to the customer. Again, you're not open the company to pay the cost. You open the company to make money. So who has to pay for the cost? The customer. How he's going to pay? By the sales price. And you have only one option here. At the time when the customers start paying. Either he's going to pay you more and going to pay you enough so he can have a profit. Either he's going to pay you less and then you have to give something from your pocket. That's business, people. That's how you're making business. That's how you're making money. Selling more than what the cost is. The question is, can you come up with the cost? And can you have in your cost everything that you need to make a profit? Otherwise, there will be no profit. So if you're a perfect manager, and let's say in some point you kind of manage 1 year, 2 years to get it right. Question for you. How many managers do you think predict and implement in their manufacturing overhead in 2020 the effect of the coronavirus? What do you think?
Can you say it again?
Let's imagine you're the manager of the company. You're the one who's doing the costing. You kind of 3 years in a row, you kind of getting here mistake less than 3%, which is in the business, that will be awesome. If you get it less than 10% or less than 5%, you're doing excellent job. Now the question is, if you 3 years in a row, you're almost getting it right. How many of those managers who almost get it right in 2020, before they come up with the when they're coming up with this predetermined manufacturing overheads, again, predetermined manufacturing overhead is estimated before the start of the year, and once you start the year, you're not changing it for the entire year. If you have to change it, you change it next year. Otherwise, your products will be the cost of your product will be all over the place, and you're never going to catch how much you're making and what you're making. So for that reason, you keep it for the entire year to be consistent. So from those managers who get it almost right for 2-3 years in a row, how many of those do you think predicted and implement the effect of the coronavirus in their predetermined overhead for 2020?
I think no one, probably.
No one, exactly. So it doesn't matter how good manager you are. It doesn't matter how much good estimation you're making. There will be events that nobody can predict. But if those events happen, you have to understand your business, you have to understand your cost, and you have to react right away. That's why most of the hotel businesses, they shut down right away. That's why some of the restaurants, they laid off their people right away. You cannot wait. You have to act right away. Otherwise, your business is gone. And the hotel business is keeping only one floor of the whole hotel. Everything else is shut down. You're keeping like a one receptionist and one cleaning person. Everybody else is gone. You don't need those people. One the environment change, I'm going to get you back. But by the time being, you're out. Is it a hard decision to make? Well, do you want to have business? But if you don't understand the cost, and if you don't understand how the cost behave as a variable or fixed, how it is, you're always never going to get it right. And you're always going to lose money. So let's have a break. One after another. Now the job costing. Let's say we have to get the the cost of our job. What we're going to do first? First, we're going to get direct material, which will be direct material which is used for the product that we're producing. Then we're going to get the direct labor. Direct labor easily can be traced for all the jobs that we're doing. Once we get those two, then we're going to have to apply the manufacturing overhead. Now, manufacturing overhead, again, including the indirect material, indirect labor, and some other indirect cost. Indirect material, indirect labor, those will be easy, kind of through the direct material and direct labor. We can easily calculate those one. But the problem is the other cost. So now let's start preparing our job cost sheet. First, on the job cost sheet, when the customer, so one thing that you have to understand, we're doing all those costing only because the customer called us and said, I want product. For that reason, we have to calculate the cost which is related to that particular order for that particular customer. So for every job, we're going to have our separate job cost sheet. We're going to get the materials directly from our inventory. We're going to see how much the materials were transferred to that particular project, and we're going to get the cost. Direct material is not our problem. Direct labor, we're going to see the person work from 8 to 4 o'clock, that 8 hours, we're paying $11 per hour, and total is $88. We're going to apply that direct labor cost. That's also not our problem. Our problem is manufacturing overhead. Now, how are we going to do the manufacturing overhead? First, we have to use allocation based. In order to understand the manufacturing overhead, we have to start allocating manufacturing overhead somehow in order to apply it. So the allocation based, such as direct labor hours or direct labor dollar amount or machine hours, is usually used in the industry to allocate manufacturing overhead to the individual project. Why we need to use that allocation base? Because otherwise it will be impossible to apply the manufacturing overhead first. Second, manufacturing overhead has so many different components inside. So for that reason, it will be very hard to apply every each of those components. The other thing is many types of manufacturing overhead we're dealing with the fix, with the mix. So for that reason, they might fluctuate during the period. And the timing of the payment of the manufacturing overhead costs at different points. Sometimes we're paying ahead, sometimes we're paying away after the period end. For that reason, we need an allocation base. Once we establish the allocation base, then we come up with the predetermined manufacturing overhead. How are we going to do that? Again, we're going to estimate the total manufacturing cost for the entire period, usually 1 year. Then based on the allocation base that we choose, which allocation base should naturally drive the cost, manufacturing overhead cost, we're going to estimate the total usage of the allocation based for the same period, which is 1 year. Once we do that, why we need that predetermined overhead? Because once we're using that predetermined overhead, it's possible now to estimate the total cost for every job. Because we have direct material, direct labor, manufacturing overhead. Second, through the predetermined manufacturing overhead, we need it because the actual cost for the entire manufacturing overhead, it's not known until the end of the period. So basically, the predetermined overhead rate gives us ability to apply the manufacturing overhead during the period without knowing the actual cost. But predetermined overhead is based now in the estimates. not based on the actual. And the predetermined overhead rate is we calculating it based on the period before the period starts. That's why we calculating that predetermined overhead rate. And we applying it to the entire period for which predetermined manufacturing overhead is. Usually, again, is 1 year. We're not changing predetermined manufacturing overhead every month. We keep it on the long period. Even if you make a mistake, you're still applying the same manufacturing overhead. You're not changing it. So how are we going to apply this manufacturing overhead? Every time when the actual usage of the allocation based comes, we applying predetermined manufacturing overhead and we applying the overhead. So if we choose the direct labor is the one that drives the manufacturing overhead, we come up with the rate for the predetermined manufacturing overhead, and then we start applying manufacturing overhead. This company, the one that we're doing these products, this company, they come up with the total cost for the upcoming period, which is 1 year, to be $640,000. For the allocation base, they choose direct labor hours. And they estimated that for the same period of time, 1 year, the total direct labor hours that they expect the workers to work was 160,000 hours. And for that reason, the predetermined manufacturing overhead is $4. What that means that now I can apply the manufacturing overhead. I'm going to see how many hours my worker work. He worked 8 hours, times $4 per hour, and I'm applying my manufacturing overhead cost. Now I can come up with the total cost for my product, and I can come up with the cost per unit. Since I see that here, in this case, I completed 2 units. So if I completed 2 units, my cost per unit should be that much. Now the next question will be, if the customer, in this case, if the customer asks me, can I have 1 more unit? Is this going to be the cost per unit? 180. Now the answer is no. If you want to find, if the customer wants 1 additional unit, we have to do this entire calculation again to come up with the new cost. Now the allocation base, it will be the key point here. Why? Because if you choose allocation base, which is not common to all your products, means some of the products you're not going to apply manufacturing overhead. If you don't apply manufacturing overhead, that means your product will be under costed, and you have to pay for that cost. So allocation based should naturally drive the overhead cost. And the cost driver is the factor that's causing the overhead. And if the base use does not drive the actual cost, then you're not going to have accurate product cost. For that reason, the common allocation base is direct labor. Why? Because direct labor usually it's everywhere. So let's see this question, and let's see if we can do this question together. First one, this company require 200 direct material, 10 direct labor hours, for which they're paying $15 per hour, and they estimated that the total overhead for the year is 760,000, and the estimated direct labor hours are 20,000. What will be the recorded cost for this job? So what we can do is I can copy this one, and since we have our Excel spreadsheet, we can easily move to that Excel spreadsheet and get usage of that Excel spreadsheet. Once you have something, try to use it, because if you don't use it, it's just a waste of time. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to pose the question somewhere, probably right here. And we're going to start applying what we see from the question. So in order to have our product, what do we need? We already know what we need. We need direct material, direct labor, manufacturing overhead. Do we have the cost of my direct material?
Yes, 200.
Let's put it 200. Do we have the cost of my direct material, direct labor?
$20,000.
So what will be the direct labor?
150
150. How we getting? 10 hours
times 15 per hour.
times 15 per hour. 150. Now we have to get the manufacturing overhead. How are we going to get the manufacturing overhead? First, we have to get the predetermined overhead, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's copy this formula and let's use it. So what will be my nominator here? Should be 760, right?
Yes.
What will be my denominator?
20,000.
20,000. So once I have those two, I can come up with my predetermined overhead. How much is it?
38.
760 or 76 divided by 2, right? $38 is my predetermined overhead. Now, how I'm applying my manufacturing overhead? Based on what? What's my allocation based? So technically, I'm asking you what I'm using for my denominator. What I'm using? Estimated direct labor, right?
Labor.
So how many hours they work?
10.
10. So 10 times
38.
38 is going to give you that. 380. And if you make it like a cost everything here, how much will be my total cost here?
590. Oh, 730.
730. Make sense? Okay, let's see if that's the case. Let's go to our slides and see what the slide says. $730. Again, we're getting the predetermined overhead, 760 divided by 20, $38, and then we start 200 direct material, 150 direct labor, and manufacturing overhead, 380, total 730.
Professor, in all the examples, are we always going to have the nominator and denominator?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you have to come up with this predetermined overhead rate. So let's see now, what's the flow of the documents? Again, remember, we not start doing anything with the job costing until we have the sales order. Once the customer comes, so the sales order starts when the customer pick up the phone and call our office, or when the customer comes in our cake store and order the cake. That's the sales order. Once we have the sales order, that means our sales is guaranteed, then we can start production. Then we start our production site, which is production order. On the production order, first we're going to request the material. Then we're going to get the direct labor from the tickets from the people that will work on the project or on the job. And then we're going to have the predetermined overhead rate, which is calculated before the beginning of the year. And once we have all those three, then we can complete our job costing sheet, which job costing sheet is going to give us the total cost and cost per unit for that particular order. So let's see that more direct using the T accounts than the one that we already did in the Excel spreadsheet. Let's repeat that one more time. So first thing first, direct material. Direct material is going to come from the raw material. In order to have the raw material, we have to purchase the raw material. That will be the first thing. So the first entry will be purchase the raw material. We're going to debit the raw material, going to be accounts payable. Now, once I have the raw material, now I can use that raw material as a direct material and indirect material. Once I use it as a direct material, it's going to go as a debit in the working process. If I use it as an indirect, it's going to go debit of the manufacturing overhead account. So my entry in this case will be debit work in process inventory, debit manufacturing overhead inventory, credit raw material inventory. Every time when you have problem with debit and credit, what you have to do is, since I'm going to give you this calculation here, what I want you to do is simply go to any of those charts here, and you already have everything. Which one is debit? Which one is credit? If it's going out of this account, is credit. If it's going in this account, is debit. If it's going to the manufacturing overhead account, is debit. If it's going out of the manufacturing overhead, is credit. So you have everything already here. And in the payroll account, that will be debit here. If you want it here, will be credit here. So every account is going to have this debit and credit, debit and credit, debit and credit, debit and credit. All those things, all the other costs here is going to come from the different accounts payables account. So you don't have to specify which one is it, but in general to know. So every time again, if you have problem with the debit and credit, come from the chart, follow the chart. If it's going out of the account, is credit. If it's going in the account, is debit. Here, coming in, debit raw material. Credit from accounts payable. Let's go back to the slides. So that's why here for the direct material, first we purchase the material, debit raw material, credit accounts payable, and then we use the material, debit work in process, debit manufacturing overhead, credit raw material. First one for the purchase, second for the usage. Then we're going to direct labor. Direct labor, we're going to get it from the salary wages payable. Where they going? First going to the work in process, direct material, manufacturing overhead as indirect material. So what will be debit work in process, debit manufacturing overhead, credit salary wages payable. Again, work in process, debit, manufacturing overhead, debit, and salaries wages payable, credit.
So, Professor, can you repeat really quick when everything that goes out is credit?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Everything that's going out is credit. Here is going out from the account on the credit side. Going in the account is debit. So next thing is the overhead. All the additional overhead for the utilities, for the taxes, for the depreciation, for everything. So what we're going to do, we're going to have one debit in the overhead and different credits, one for the accounts payable for utilities, one for the property taxes, one for the prepaid insurance, and one for the accumulated depreciation. But everything is going to go directly to the manufacturing overhead. So once we have the manufacturing overhead, then we're going to start applying the manufacturing overhead every time when the product is produce. We're going to start applying the manufacturer overhead. How are we going to apply it? As a debit working process, create manufacturer overhead. Same idea here. Manufacturer overhead, going out from the manufacturer overhead account and going in the working process. Going in, that means debit. Going out, credit, since those are assets account. What's going to happen at the end? Manufacturing overhead, we're going to check at the end of the period and we're going to see which one is more. Is it the actual more or the applied is more? On the debit side, always going to be the actual overhead during the period for which we paid. On the credit side, always going to be the overhead that we applied during the period. What's going to happen with the non-manufacturing cost, the one that the period cost? Well, those will be directly expensed. That might be salary expenses and advertising expenses. For those, we're directly going to go salary expenses, salary payable, advertising expense, accounts payable for the advertising. Now, once the product is ready, we're going to move it from the work in process into the finished goods inventory. How are we going to do that? By debiting finished goods and creating cost of goods manufactured. Or we're going to create the work in process account for the cost of goods manufactured. So again, we're going to debit finished goods account and we're going to create work in process inventory. Now that's going to stay, product is going to stay in the finished goods until it's sold. Once it's sold, it's going to become cost of goods sold. So we're going to debit cost of goods sold and we're going to create finished goods inventory. That will be to reduce our inventory, but at the same time we have to show our sales. So that's why at the point of sales, you have two journal entries. One is to show the sales and the cash or accounts receivables that you have to get. And the second one is to reduce the inventory or finished goods in this case, and to show how much is the cost of the product that you just sold. So basically, every time when you make a sale, you know how much you're making. Why? Because you have the sales price, you have the cost of the product that you just sold, and then on the sales, you're getting the cash. On the inventory, your inventory going down, and you write off your item that you just sold, and you see the cost right away. So for the overhead, again, you have two options here. Option one is under apply overhead. Under apply overhead exists when the overhead applied during the period is less than the actual amount of the overhead during the same period. The second option is over applied overhead, means that the overhead that you apply during the period is more in this case than the overhead that you actually paid during the period. Once you compare those two, let's see what's happened with this company. This company, the actual overhead for the period was 650. Why? Because with the total hours, 170,000 hours. How much total overhead was applied during the period if the predetermined overhead rate was $4? So we have actual 650. The question is what we have on the other side of the account. Well, on the other side of the account, we're applying overhead based on the actual hours times the predetermined overhead. Actual hours 170,000. We applying $4 per every hour. That means we apply 680. So in this case, do we have over applied or under applied? What do you think?
Under?
So let's see. This is our case, right? I'm going to copy it and I'm going to move to Excel spreadsheet. So this is the sheet that we're chasing here. That's number 4. Let's go here and I'm going to go with this one. This one is fresh and let's move it here. That will be number 5. So let's see our question. Our question says, let's paste it here. Not like that, I want to paste it as a picture. So I can flip it, reduce it a little bit. So let's see our account. This is the account that we're chasing. I'm going to move it right here where it's empty. And I'm going to bring the question. And you're going to tell me what to do with this account. Okay. On one side, we have the actual, correct? On the other side, manufacturer overhead, that's actual. On the other side, we have applied. How much is my actual?
650,000?
650,000. The question is how much I applied. And I'm applying 170,000 time
Yeah.
$4.
Mm.
So how much I applied?
680.
680. Which one is higher?
Apply.
Applied.
Apply.
So where am I? Over applied or under applied?
Apply.
With how much?
Oh,
30,000.
30,000.
Make sense?
Yeah, look.
That's always what you have to do. Put it in the
But
chart.
how do we know that we have to multiply 170 per $4 an hour?
Because that's how we're applying it. How we applying the overhead?
Mhm.
We're applying the
Okay.
actual
Mhm.
time the predetermined overhead, right?
Okay. Mhm.
The actual direct labor hours time the predetermined overhead is going to give you the manufacturer overhead applied. And that's how we get it. Because we're applying for every hours that the actual workers, we're applying for those. That's why we need this
Okay.
predetermined
Mhm.
overhead, right? Once we
Mhm.
get the predetermined overhead, you have to use it. But you're using it only when we actually working, when we actually having the direct labor hours work. So let's go back to the slides. And now we understand that in this case, we have $30,000 more. We applied $30,000 more, which give us the over applied with $30,000. So now the question is, what are we going to do with those $30,000? We understand we over applied. So we have two options here. Since we know that, watch this, on the Excel spreadsheet, let's go back to the Excel spreadsheet. And the scenario that we have over applied. That's under applied here. Over applied is this scenario here, which is over applied. So in this scenario, we have 120. Let's put it here over applied. So you can know once you see this chart later, once I give it to you, you know which one is over applied and which one is under apply. And let's make it equal. So one is over applied, this is our scenario. So if we over applied, we know that effect first goes to the manufacturing overhead, work in process account, then going to the finished goods account, and the last thing that goes is the cost of goods sold. So what we did here, we directly, with the amount over applied, we adjusted the cost of goods sold. That would be one option. Directly go to the cost of goods sold, adjust the cost of goods sold. Now the other option will be we to chase with all this production that we produce. Is there anything in the work in process? Is there anything in the finished goods left? And how much is the cost of goods sold? And then we're going to proportionally allocate the $20,000 or $30,000 in the slides. Proportionally, we're going to allocate it to the work in process account, finished goods account, and cost of goods sold. That's why there are two options here. One option is directly adjust cost of goods sold, which is the final result. The other one go proportional to the work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold. How are we going to do the proportional? Let's first do the simple one. Let's do first the allocation directly to the cost of goods sold. Since we're over applying the cost of goods sold, now we have to reduce the cost of goods sold. How are we going to reduce it? By crediting cost of goods sold and debiting manufacturing overhead account. And then we're going to get rid of that. Now, how are we going to apply it to the proportional to the all the other accounts? First, we're going to see from the 680, remember the 680 was our total manufacturing overhead that we apply, 680. Then we're going to chase this 680 where they are. Well, from the 680 that we applied, we still have in the work in process 68,000. In the finished goods, which hasn't been sold yet, we have 204,000. And the cost of goods sold is the remaining. So what we have to do now, we have to come up with the percentage. Obviously, work in process will be 10%. Finished goods most likely will be 30%. And the remaining is going to go to cost of goods sold. So once we come up with the percentages, then we know how much we have to allocate. We have to allocate $3,000. That's how much, $30,000. That's how much was my difference. So those $30,000, I'm going to apply it like $3,000 going to go to the work in process. $9,000 going to go to the finished goods. And finished goods. And $18,000 going to go to the cost of goods sold. And my problem is solved. So again, one option is you to go 30,000 directly reduce cost of goods sold. The other option is use the proportional method and allocate it proportionally to the work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold. And once you do that, you have to do this journal entry, reduce the manufacturing overhead on the debit side. Here, you're going to plug manufacturing overhead to balance it to zero. And you're going to reduce work in process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold. Total of the exactly same amount. Now let's see this question for us. This company, let's copy it and let's move to the Excel spreadsheet so we can do it together. So for that one, I'm going to use the last one that we work. That will be number 6 here. So this one will disappear and the new one's going to come. Now this company, delete those one. The actual manufacturing overhead was that much. Predetermined overhead rate was $4. And the actual work, they're applying the overhead. Now you can see that's not direct labor hours. They're using the machine hours to apply the overhead. Machine hours that they work is 290. The question is, where is the overhead? Over apply or under apply? And how much?
Over.
So let's see. Actual, how much is the actual?
1.210.
1,210,000.
Okay, that's our actual. Where is the, how much we applied? Do we have that number?
1,260,000.
How did you calculate it?
290,000 machine hours times $4 per machine hour.
And
Yes.
$4 per machine hours. So the number that we have is 160. So where we are, which one is more, actual or applied? Actual.
Actual.
What that means, we under apply.
Under apply.
So if it's under
60.
applied, the question is how much is under applied? Under applied 50,000, right?
50,000 under
Yeah. Letter B.
Letter B will be the correct one.
50,000 under applied.
That will be this amount minus that amount.
So if the applied is more, it's over applied, right?
That's correct. So the other scenario will be, let's go with the other scenario, that will be under apply. Let's go with this, the other scenario will be, for example, if this one was, let's say not 190, let's go with 300 here. That's still not 310. Let's see, 310. There we go. If it's 310, now we over apply. Make sense? Over applied. If the applied is more than the actual, then we over applied. How much over applied here? With 30,000. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the scenario when we is that much. Let me change the other one and let's copy it here. Let's see if I can change it. Yes, I can change it here. 310. But then the answer is not going to be here. For this one, let's say paste spatial. Let's put it as a picture. It's going to be this scenario is for if the 310 hours are applied. But now we don't have the question, the answer. Let me see if I go with 320, am I gonna get something that is I can use as an answer here? No, like it's 70. So okay, let me modify it a little bit. So we can have the both scenario 320 here, and this one will be 70 and 70 here. And then you're going to have the both scenarios. So this is the scenario when watch this. Now we have 1,210,000 predetermined overhead. That's the actual cost. Predetermined overhead is $4, but they work 320 machine hours now. What will be the correct answer?
$70,000
What?
over.
Over applied. So how we get the 70,000? That will be 320,000 times $4.
Or
So we applied 280. So now we over applying how much? 70,000 more.
70.
Okay, let's go back to slides. On the original slides, not on this one, on the original slides, which we have here with the 290. Let's go back to the original. With the 290, we over applied with $50,000. Okay, so now, again, if it's under applied, one alternative is to increase the cost of goods sold. The second alternative is to increase work in process, finished goods, cost of goods sold. If it's over applied, we have to decrease the cost of goods sold, or we have to decrease the work process, finished goods, and cost of goods sold. Now, think about this and let me know what your answer is. What effect will have adjustment in the cost of goods sold for the over applied overhead on the net operating income? So we have to adjust the cost of goods sold because we have the over applied overhead. And the question is, what will be the effect of the net operating income?
Will decrease.
Let's get this one and let's think about it. The best thing again is to go to the chart and to see, work on it one after another so we can come up with the logical solution here. Let's get the very first one. No, actually, we're looking for over applied, right? The question was over applied. Let's get this one. Number 3 was over applied. Let's put it here. That will be 7. And let's think about together. So, first thing first. Our overhead is over applied. Correct? We're over applying the overhead. Currently, where we are, where is our operating income? Is it overstated or understated? So now the manufacturing overhead, we over applying, right? We're over applying. So manufacturing overhead here is plus 20 more. Means our product is overcosted. Cost of good manufacturing and cost of goods sold are plus 20. So where is my cost of goods sold here? Overstated or understated? Overstated with 20. Make sense? Now I have to adjust it. How can I adjust it? By reducing it with 20, correct? But I'm going to reduce with 20 cost of goods sold directly. So if I reduce the cost of goods sold with 20, what will be the effect on my operating income? Is it going to go up or is it going to go down? Can you see it? What's happened with my operating income? Going up or going down? Up. Why? Because I'm reducing the cost of goods sold. You're reducing the cost. Once you reduce the cost, operating income naturally is going to come up. So if you're over applying overhead, that means you put in more cost. If you have to adjust it, that means you have to reduce the cost. If you reduce the cost, operating is going to go up or down? Up.
Up.
Make sense? Does this make sense, people?
Yes. So if I under apply the overhead, it should increase
Go
that.
decrease, yes.
Okay.
That's correct. So in this case, our operating income is going to increase. So the flow, the summary of the overhead thing that we did today. First, we have to estimate the total manufacturing overhead cost. Then we have to estimate the allocation based. Then come up with the predetermined overhead rate. Once we have that predetermined overhead rate, every time when we actually using the allocation based, we're going to apply the overhead. At the end of the period, we're going to compare actual versus applied. And we have two scenarios, under apply or over apply. If it's over applied, we're adjusting cost of goods sold, work in process, finished goods. If it's under apply, cost of goods sold. Or we can adjust both. Model of the cost flow is raw material, we're getting direct material and indirect material. From the raw material, we're getting direct material and indirect material. From the salary wages, we're getting the direct labor and indirect labor. Now, when the direct material, direct labor, and manufacturing overhead meet each other, that means we're applying the manufacturing overhead account, then we're going to have complete product. Once we have complete product, that means cost of goods manufactured. Then we're moving to the finished goods. Once the finished goods is sold, become cost of goods sold. At the end of the period, we're going to compare actual versus applied, and we're going to see, do we have, if the balance is, if we put more on the applied side, we're going to have over applied. If the balance is higher on the debit side, we're going to have under applied. And we have to adjust for those ones. What we're going to do with, if we have the multiple overhead rates, then become a very complex things, and that is not part of this course. So for the technology, information technology, what we're going to do is we're going to use a language which easily can be translated into the Excel spreadsheet. And that's going to help us to transfer the information in the Excel spreadsheet. In the Excel spreadsheet, as you can see, we can easily work with the numbers, come up with the calculation, and get the results. And that's about this chapter. The next one is something that is not related to us,